Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Sam Dever Podcast, episode 61. In this episode, I talk to a very special guest, Chris Liebe. Chris Liebe was one of my acting teachers at Playhouse West. He is also the creator and founder of the Hollywood Film Lab. Chris is an incredible human being. I have quoted him several times throughout this podcast history, and to have him here in person, the stars aligned, the timing for us to do this, and it does not disappoint. Chris is full of wisdom, inspiration, and has been a huge creative motivator in my own creative career. So I really look forward to all of you hearing, watching, listening to this conversation. The book of the episode is going to be a book I've talked about often on here and came up in this conversation, is Anthony DeMello, Awareness. This is one of my favorite books I've ever read. Anthony DeMello is one of my favorite authors. I just feel he puts a lot of good life perspective in a very digestible format and really makes you think, really makes you become aware. And awareness was a theme of Chris and I's conversation of being aware of your values and being aware of who you are. So I thought it was fitting to make this book of the episode again, Anthony DeMello, Awareness. If you want to listen to the podcast, you can follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts. If you want to watch the podcast, subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/@thesamdeverpodcast. Without further ado, here's my conversation with Chris. Chris Liebe, welcome to the Sam Dever Podcast.
Thank you, Sam. Thanks for having me. Nice to be here.
Yeah, no, if this podcast ends today, we have a phenomenal guest to go out on. You're looking sharp. It's great to see you. I haven't seen you in, it's been, at least 3 years.
It's a bit. Yeah,
probably.
It's been a little bit, yeah.
How have you been?
Good. Yeah, I taught a class today. So
what studio did you come from?
Lancashire.
Oh, right across the street?
Yeah. So
this is like the post class, the after class.
Yeah. Yeah, they're all coming over in a little bit. They'll be joining us. So.
And what class was that?
It was an advanced class.
Okay.
I covered for another teacher. And it was a good group. Really, really good group. I've been very impressed. I've been sitting in on a bunch of the classes over the last few weeks and very impressed by what's going on. Just the quality of the work. I don't know if it's post-COVID, let's get back to it or what it is, but the enthusiasm and the work ethic and the quality of the work have been superb.
Yeah.
And seen a bunch of the live productions lately. Permafrost, Baby Dance.
Both were incredible.
One Acts are coming up. Yeah, some really, really incredible work. Quite impressive.
It really reminds you too when you see that work on stage. It's like there's just nothing like it. Like there's just no, and people who don't know, they just don't know.
Sure.
It's to be up there and to even just witness it.
Yeah.
And just truly to live in that reality for that moment. Yeah. Whatever else has existed in your life, it just all drops.
Yeah.
Right there.
Yeah. That's just something I don't think, I don't know, maybe with VR and things like that in the future, but the experience of live theaters, there's nothing like it. Nothing like it. And I think even if we had the technology to kind of replicate it or emulate it in some way, I don't know. Some years ago, I've seen some of my heroes live. I saw Al Pacino in God Looked Away. I believe he played Tennessee Williams. It was an experimental or rehearsal thing at the Pasadena Playhouse with Judith Light, who was incredible. Oh. But it's just like, right, I'm in the second row and there's Al Pacino and you're just starstruck and awe. I've seen Sally Field in The Glass Menagerie on Broadway.
Oh my gosh.
I saw Kate Winslet in a
She's incredible.
Chekhov play on Broadway. Saw James Gandolfini in God of Carnage with Jeff Daniels. And it's just, it's just incredible to see some of your heroes, people you revere and idolize for their abilities. To see them live, there's nothing like it.
Nothing like, what did someone say? I've heard this quote get thrown around. It's like, if you want to be famous, you do movies. If you want to be rich, do TV. Mm-hmm. And if you want to be a great actor, do theater.
Okay.
Something along those lines. But like to hear those names, like people know them from movies, but like
sure,
they know. I know I've heard Pacino in interviews. Like he's like,
Mm.
no, you got to do theater.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
that's I became how I became. Like him and De
Yeah.
Niro talked about in the New York days, just doing constant theater
Yeah.
before anyone knew who any of them were.
Yeah. I think that's the nice thing about today is you can, undulate and go back and forth. And I think a lot of actors today do that, you know.
You bring up an interesting. I have never even thought of this because I know a lot of people in the music world are talking about the AI now because they're taking people's voices and creating songs out of them, and
Sure.
that's becoming a whole issue for better
Yeah.
or for worse. But with acting, yeah, I haven't even thought of that. If they're gonna do something with film and AI,
Well,
isn't it?
it's, it seems to, in the limited experience I've had with it, it's very immersive and you feel like you're there. And I mean, you do kind of know, at least I've seen with the screen door effect, the pixels, right? To get the pixels that dense so that way you can't count the individual pixels. I haven't seen anything personally that's given that illusion of photorealism. But I mean, it's just a matter of time. And the whole rumor is Apple's on their way with something. And, I don't think they usually enter the market until they think they can knock something out of the park. So if they're getting into that space and going to be competing with Meta and other things, I think it will be pretty amazing.
Yeah, it is incredible. When we were talking before we even started rolling, you think now is one of the best times to be a creator?
Well, yeah, because we were talking about in class today, when I was just a little kid, I was kind of making this joke, but I used to make movies on a VHS camera that was tethered to a VCR deck that was slung over my shoulder. And, in junior high and high school, making my own home movies. And then, of course, editing everything with 2 VCRs. And then, of course, every time you record a copy, the quality of the image degrades and gets less and less. And then, of course, then you've cut your project together and then you've got one copy of it. And then if you make a copy of that, it's even less quality. And then it's like, what do you do with it? There was no internet. There was no distribution. So, you're making something and then what do you do? Make 50 copies of something and mail those VHS tapes around town or give them to your friends. And it just, nothing ever came of it.
Yeah.
So it was very, very difficult as compared to today, like the iPhone in your pocket can shoot Dolby Vision, HDR, 4K, and for example, in the Red ecosystem, you can get for the price for about $25,000, you can get their digital brain, which is 8K.
Oh
I mean, that's
God.
just unheard.
8K?
8K,
I didn't even know you could shoot in that.
yeah, it's just unheard of. I mean, $25,000 is still a lot of money, but in comparison to, cameras that were far inferior from, a decade or two ago that used to cost $250,000, so it's the technology just keeps getting better and better and more affordable. And of course, now you have distribution with the internet. You shoot something on your iPhone and your grandmother in Tallahassee can watch it, after dinner tonight.
Yeah.
Right. So it's quite incredible to, I think, be a creative and filmmaker and actor today. It's more opportunity than ever with streaming services and everybody looking for content and quality content. So if you can tell a good story and execute it and keep it on time and on budget, it's, there's a lot of opportunity out there.
Yeah, it's a good. I actually listened to your podcast with Michael Lopez on the Playhouse West podcast.
Yeah.
Really well done. I really enjoyed your two's conversation. And you had mentioned in there, there's no excuse. There's no excuse now, like for any of it.
Right.
Like all the tools are there for anything you want to do.
Yeah, there really isn't. There really isn't. It just depends if it's, really in alignment with your values. And that's something that I spoke about at the last year's Playhouse West Film Festival. I gave a little talk on being a successful filmmaker. And I kind of flipped it. Instead of talking about the things that make you successful, I talked about the things that sabotage your career and sabotage your journey.
Yeah.
And one of those things is not working within your hierarchy of values. And that it's very, very important for everybody to find, everybody has their own unique fingerprint-like set of values, from the things that they value the most to the things that they value the least. And a lot of times we can unknowingly, consciously or unconsciously, ingest the values of somebody else. Like we put another person or an institution or a government or a community up on a pedestal, and knowingly or unknowingly we ingest their values. So, something that you should do before you aspire to anything, if you want to be a doctor or an attorney or an actor or a filmmaker or whatever it is this really what you want to do, or are you doing it because you have this obligatory sense of this is what I'm supposed to do, or I'm internalizing the values of somebody else?
I totally align with that. Yeah, it really comes down to awareness, like knowing yourself. And I've said this before. I don't know how many people are even aware to even be aware
Correct.
of that, if that makes sense.
Yes.
Like they'll go their entire life and never even knew that they were doing something that truly wasn't their calling or what
Right.
they didn't. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Like
absolutely.
Yeah. So I really align with what you just said.
Yeah, and
that.
you have to figure that. And someone who I was very influenced by, Dr. John D. Martini, talks about this whole thing, and I'm getting most of these teachings and philosophies from what he shares, and it's really, really important. And he says, whatever kind of just intrinsically shows up in your life, and I make this joke. My nephew, I've got to remind him to take out the trash. Like he's been doing it for years now, and I still have to remind him to take out the trash, or remind him to put the dishes away, or do his chores, or make his bed, or vacuum his room. Do what he's supposed to do. I don't have to remind him to turn on his PS5. I don't have to remind him to get onto Instagram. I don't have to remind him to go to the gym and work out. He does these things intrinsically without any need for exterior motivation, and it just shows up. He just does it automatically on a regular basis. And that's very much in his values, those types of things that I just mentioned. But taking out the trash is not really on his hierarchy of values.
Yeah.
It's really not. And I think that's a problem, is when a lot of people, parents or other people in authority, judge their children or people below them. And you hear this comment all the time: well, my son or my daughter or whoever, they're just lazy. They're lazy. And they're actually really not lazy. They're just not interested in what you're interested in. And so they get branded and labeled as lazy, and that's not it. And so you have to examine your life and find out, okay, what's constantly showing up? What do I think about all the time? What do I spend the most of my time contemplating or planning or thinking about? Where do I put my energy? Where do I spend the most amount of money? And it's already there. It's already manifesting itself inside of you. And I don't think people look at that closely enough, or they find it and they completely disregard it. There's Dr. DeMartini told a story one time about this woman who was basically trying to find what you love and find a way to get handsomely paid for it. And so this woman went to one of his seminars, and at the end of it, he said, she's like, I'm having a hard time connecting to what I really, really love. And he said, well, what do you really, really love? She said, well, what I really love to do is go to the park on the weekends with my dog. And I love spending time with my dog and dressing it up in outfits and all this kind of stuff. And he says, okay, tell me more about that. And he says, yes, people ask me all the time to take a photo with my dog. And he says, you need to capitalize on that. So the next time somebody does that, you say, sure, you can totally take a photo with my dog, but I charge for his outfits and stuff to keep him looking good. So it'd be a $5 donation. And, a couple people were like, no, thanks. And then another person said, can I take like 10 photos? I'll give you $50. And so she actually started to make a living dressing up her dog in outfits. And then one day a casting director happened to be in for commercials, found the dog, discovered it, and the dog ended up being like the Purina dog chow dog or something, like on the cover of the boxes of food and stuff like that. And she ended up becoming a millionaire.
Oh my God.
Because of her dog.
And she followed that inner voice,
Yeah.
that intuition, just did what she wanted to do.
Yeah. So, that's people, we get it backwards. So we have to do what we love and love what we do, and then find a way to harness the power of that and get handsomely paid for it.
So yeah, it's almost like you find out the thing you would do that you don't care if you get paid for it, and then find a way to get paid for it.
Correct.
Yeah.
And I've heard another saying is the difference between a career and a job is if they took away your paycheck, you'd stop doing it.
Wow.
Like for some reason, if I wasn't able to be financially compensated for teaching acting or teaching filmmaking, I'd do it anyway. I would do it anyway. So that's the difference between a job and a career.
That right there is the gem. And I told you before the show, things are just my memory is just going to start pulling Chris Levy wisdom as we go. And I remember you said something in class one time, and I'm paraphrasing you, but it was something along the lines of, sometimes your biggest deterrents are the ones closest to you.
Oh, yeah.
The ones that love you the most. And I cannot tell you, and I mean that with all due respect toward you, because in their mind, they think they know what's best for you. Or like you said, like they've labeled you as, oh, you're a failure because you can't do this. Or you're not, whatever it is. And how many people just dreams get smoldered out right then and there.
Yeah.
And it's done.
Yeah. Well, you can really do three things in terms of your relationship with other people. One, you can put them up on a pedestal where you revere them and you consciously or subconsciously internalize their values. They're not your values, but you ingest them. And the other thing that you can do is you can actually put somebody into a pit where you impose your values onto them. And that's what I think we're alluding to when we say, some of the people closest to us in our lives, our own loved ones, our own family members that don't have the same values as you, that don't understand you. Their value may be financial security. Their values may be paying off a 30-year mortgage in 15 years. Their values may be early retirement. Their values may be different types of things. And if that doesn't align with them, they judge you and they put you in a pit and they impose their values on you. Or you can come to the highest realizations that we're all the same, that we all have a unique fingerprint and a unique hierarchy of values, and that we're actually all equal. We're just different. And that's the best ideal, because then we respect each other and we allow everybody to be who they're meant to be.
Who they're meant to be. And
yeah.
I reminded me of another one. I mean, you talked one time too of those that had given up what they really wanted to do, and talking to them years later, and like you can see something in their eyes, like something's dead inside. There's missing, because I've experienced periods of that myself. Like for whatever reason or justification, you work in a job and just takes over, and you don't get time to. It's just something's missing. So it's interesting what you said earlier about just that intuition pulling you, and you're unconsciously doing it. That's what you really want to do.
Yeah, it's already showing up in your life.
Right, exactly.
It's already manifesting itself. It's just intuitively, and you have to connect to what that is. But I think another thing where people run into trouble, and we can do it with some things in life. I think we're pretty good about doing it with children, having children. And relationships. But for somehow or another, the masses have disregarded this wisdom when it comes to other aspects of life. So for example, when I'm talking about with children, you talk to any parent, or you talk to anybody that's raised a child, and you say, how is it? Like everybody knows that if you're going to have a child, it's going to be the highlights of your life and the most painful, tragic, difficult things to go through, right? Anybody that knows that, and traditionally when people get married, they say it in the vows, for rich or for poor, right? In sickness and in health, right? Do you take the highs and the lows? Right. And anybody that knows that's raised children they say it's the most rewarding part of their life and the most emotionally draining, difficult, traumatic part of their life. And so we're okay with it when it comes to relationships, and we're okay with it when it comes to children. I think generally speaking, people get that. But then they don't apply that same principles to their other life. And the problem that ends up happening is people have this fantasy of a one-sided universe. And what that means is that they can expect to have a positive without a negative. It's like you can have light without darkness, or you can have left without right, or you can have up without down. And anytime you compare your life to a one-sided fantasy, you're always going to lose. And I think that's a huge source of depression today. There's a Buddhist saying that goes something along the lines of the pursuit of that which is unattainable And the desire to avoid that which is unavoidable is the cause of all human suffering. And I think people that are in pursuit, and the young people today, especially with social media, they get this idea that, right, people are just broadcasting the highlights of their lives, this one-sided part. And so people can get this wrong expectation that life is going to be this one-sided, blissful experience. And then it's a fantasy. It's a fantasy that you create in your mind. And if you compare your life to this fantasy that you've invented for yourself, you're always going to lose. And that's going to lead to depression, dissatisfaction, and a whole host of other problems. And I think whether it's being realistic about the craft of acting or filmmaking or being artistic or having a family, having children, whatever it is that you have to look at what is authentically truthful about the duality of life. And that you can't, it's like trying to crack a magnet in half and only take the positive and disregard the negative. You can't do it, and it causes a lot of problems because there's only really three things that we can control in life, and that's our perceptions, our decisions, and our actions. And if your perceptions are not grounded in reality and truthfulness, it's going to affect your decisions and your actions. It's going to cause a lot of problems for you.
Whew, there's a whole list of things I can pull out of that. That's well, 'cause I was listening to something too, and someone says, "Are you creating the life you want, or are you letting life take you whatever direction?" And then it really does remind me how key it is to know your values, like what you're saying. Because if you don't know those, you're going to get pulled. It's going to be so easy for you to sway this way, sway that way. But when you know who you are, when you know what you want, it's going to be a lot easier to make decisions, I would think.
Yeah.
Because you know that what's not for you. You know what your boundaries are.
Yeah.
You know
you'll take the good and the bad.
Yeah.
Some of the best times I've ever had on my life is when I was on set and we were running over a budget, and I shot a short film with Mark Pellegrino, a fantastic actor, many, many years ago. And we had some troubles on set with production. And we started at 7 a.m. and we ended at 7 a.m. I shot for 24 hours straight.
Wow.
24 hours straight. And some of the crew were leaving in the middle of the night, and I was begging the actors to. It was poor planning on some and some extenuating circumstances that just couldn't have been predicted that caused the problem. But man, I tell you, when at the end, after no sleep for I don't know how many hours it was, but it was such a high. I was like, man, it was like so stressful and lack of sleep, and everybody's moody and emotional, but wouldn't trade it for the world. So, when you're working within your purpose and what fulfills you, you take the good and you take the bad. It's all part of it.
Yeah, very purpose. I think that's, especially as of late, that's one thing I really, once you're on your purpose, I mean, yeah, like you're exactly right. It's not even bad. It's just part of it. You've just accepted, I'm going to take all of it, whatever this is.
You take it all.
You take it all.
Yeah, you take it all.
And
that's the same in a relationship.
Yeah.
Right? In the beginning, it's this honeymoon romance and all this stuff, wonderful
dopamine,
stuff. Yeah, sure. I mean, that's right. That's the way we run physiologically, and the brain chemistry and all that stuff, right? To get us engaged, to get us right into that union or that arrangement or partnership, whatever. But then, of course, then the other side, right? Because it's not one-sided, so we have to see the other side, and then, of course, right? But then we say, well, you know what? I'll take it anyway. I'll take the whole package. Because it's fulfilling, it's purposeful for me.
It's almost too like that's a lot of things in life. There's always going to be the two sides, like the light and the dark. Like you just said, you can't break the magnet.
No.
So no matter how awesome something or incredible something is to you, it's going to come. Yeah. There's going to be a balance to that.
Yeah. And the problem is that people somehow think that there can be one side. There's always a positive and a negative. Whether you can see it or not, it's there. And sometimes seeing that other side comes with time and perspective being removed from it. And sometimes people don't see it at all, or they're not even aware, like you were saying earlier. They're just not even aware that there's two sides. Because all there are really in the universe is events. There's just events. That's all that happens, whether it's the extinction of the dinosaurs or whatever, what do you have it? They're just events. It's us as humans that label, that give a charge to that event, a positive or negative charge. And whether you can see the other side of the coin, it's there, whether you're aware of it or not, it's there. You know, if you were to win the lottery, people, oh, it'd be so amazing. I won the lottery, right? I won the Powerball. I've got $20 million. I'm on Easy Street now. No. Right? There's the stress of having that extra money, the friends and the family members that come out of the woodwork. Everybody starts reaching out their hands, and you got to worry about who you can trust. Right? And then, of course, now everybody wants to manage your money, or you make the wrong financial decisions, or you overextend yourself because you think, well, gosh, I've got this endless supply of money now. I could never not possibly spend it all. And if I think of the statistics are, is that most people that become millionaires within a certain amount of years go totally broke.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And then how does it feel? What's worse, to have had all that money and to be back where you were, or to never have had it at all? You follow?
Yeah.
So people just think, oh, it's a one-sided event. Nope. Even when positive things happen, there's always a negative side to it, whether you're aware of its existence or not.
Mark Manson wrote a book, Subtle Art of Not Giving an F. And he talks about there's bad problems and good problems. No matter how good your life is, you're going to have problems still. But he's all about, like, make it as good as you can so your problems are at least problems you want to deal with. Like, he talked about going to the gym. Like, he gave an example. Like, everyone's like, oh, man, I got to work. That's a good problem. Like, you got to go improve your health. But you got to do it. And it may not feel good. And it may be a lot of work, you know, but that's a lot better than having a bad health condition or something that might come up if you don't do that. So I have to mention this because I want to get into your background and everything you do in film and acting. You said something, and I cannot tell you, at this pivotal moment in my life, I had a major leg injury. And you said something in class one time. You said, great pain is coming. May not happen today, may not happen tomorrow, but it's either going to happen, it's going to happen to you, it's going to happen to people you know, you love. Eventually it's going to come if you haven't experienced some of it already. And I had this major leg injury. It was horrific. But in that moment, as the pain really hadn't kicked in.
So you're thinking of me.
Yeah. I think,
great. I love the association.
But no, I'm on this trail. The ambulance is coming. The people, I knew okay, I'm going to get out of this. But in that moment, it was something I had never felt or experienced at all. And I'm like, oh my God. Chris was right. Great pain is coming. And maybe that's I don't know if it's the best of examples, but it just shows us how fragile we really are, how fragile this existence really is. So I think it is, and as you were talking about the duality of positive and negative, I think it gave me clarity and, okay, this thing can flip. This thing can change rather quickly, and it's going to change eventually. So I just had to tell you that. It was just, I don't know, it was a good understanding because to me, I viewed it as a positive because it makes you want to go out there and make that film project you ever make. Go do those things that you've always wanted to do. Go find your values, knowing that this trip is going to end one way or the other.
I think I remember that, what we were talking. I think it had to do in relation, because I think in the class we're in, we had a number of young adults, people that may have been on the earlier side of life. And I think it was something in relationship to what we're talking about, but also for the journey of the actor. Life has a way of informing you about things. And I think there were a couple of actors that just couldn't find the reality of a scene. It was just currently, or at the time, it was currently beyond their ability to grasp it or understand it. And I think what I was referring to is like, life is going to teach you, and you're just going to become a better actor just by hanging on and going through this thing called life, because everything's going to happen to you. And you may not be ready to bring justice to this role now, but someday you probably will, because you can't avoid certain things in life. And one of those things is pain. unfortunately, or currently death. We haven't figured that one out yet.
Yeah.
And, so yes. And it's also to not be blindsided to the things that are coming, but also and that's one of the interesting things about being an actor for the long haul. There are things that you could have acted before, but now they've passed you by and you can't act them anymore. And then there's things that you can do now that you're perfect for. And then there's also things that, despite how long you've lived, you're not ready for other roles yet. You will be later on in life. And it's quite fascinating, the journey of the actor. As you move through life, you have to move through the roles that you can do and say goodbye to old ones. I think it was Olivier that said, by the time I finally figured out Hamlet, I was too old to play him.
Wow.
Yeah. And of course, he won awards by playing Hamlet. But he said, by the time I really figured him out, I was too old to play him.
Wow. And that's one thing. And you talk about the people that choose to do this lifelong.
Sure.
Some may, like Daniel Day-Lewis, for example, but he's technically retired, right? I don't think he's pursuing any of it right now. But I can't remember what movies it was between, but he took like a 5-year break. And he was on Charlie Rose. He was like, so what were you doing?
Yeah.
He was like making shoes, or I don't know what he was doing. He was just living life.
Yeah.
And he was like in his niece's play playing and you might have told us too. He played the tree in his niece's play or something like that. He said he really just concentrated on being that tree. But it's like almost viewing, it's just like, really, the more you live, just the more you're going to be able to approach certain roles and understand, but that takes time.
It does.
I mean, you told us once too, you can't make a rose bloom any faster.
I got that one from Bob Carnegie.
Did you?
Yeah,
okay, I want to properly quote it then.
Yeah, no. Well, yeah. I mean, I don't know if he coined it or where he got it from, but yeah, it's true. You can't make a rose bloom any faster than it wants to. And that's just something that you have to, right there. That's having those unrealistic expectations, comparing and it's so, I think one of the worst things for young actors is the breakout overnight star, if that even is a real thing, right? Because actors don't look to there was an article one time, speaking of the actor Mark Pellegrino again, it was an article from some years ago, and it was like highlighting these actors, and it said something like, like 10 years to be an overnight success. And Mark was like one of those actors listed that he'd been pounding the pavement and working and working and working and working. And then all of a sudden, after like being at it for 10 plus years, all of a sudden the success started to happen and everybody just looks at that and then nobody, right? So that's a terrible thing for actors, is to compare themselves to what they think is instant popularity. And especially today, you can be famous for nothing practically, if you're famous for being famous. And of course, if they can make a buck off those people, they'll put them in a couple of films or see what they can do. And then of course, young actors compare themselves to that fantasy, that rarity. And of course, they just become disheartened and, psych themselves out, which, again, isn't right. Again, it's controlling your perceptions. It's very, very powerful.
I think we maybe discussed in class too. Like, I think at one point, a lot of studios or people were trying to cast people with big followings, thinking like, oh, we'll just put people with big followings in our movies. But I think maybe they found
like Instagram,
or influencers. I'm not, like, maybe there's been some that have done a good job, but then there's probably a lot that just can't act. Like, it's not. That's the thing with acting. Like you realize that, and you told us like it's like the gym. Like, class is like the gym. You got to go work out. Sure. It's a muscle. You have to go. And that's one thing when you start doing the work, when you start working on a play or even just a scene, the amount of work you put into that, you just don't go up there and throw. The lines are really the last thing you learn a lot of times.
Yeah. Well, I think it depends on the role. I think it was Harry Dean Stanton, great actor, that said something like, like Hollywood could turn anybody into an actor as long as it's not, Chekhov or Strindberg or something like that. But if it's just a role with just nice, simple conversational reality, and the DP that knows what they're doing, and the director that can work with them. I mean, of course, once you start getting to the meteor roles or the roles that call for more, well, then they may, take themselves out of the running. But that's the thing, you can, and the crazy thing too is you don't see all the takes that ended up on the cutting room floor. I saw this thing on Entertainment Tonight many, many years ago. I won't say who the actors were, but Entertainment Tonight did. And I was quite shocked because this actress has gone on to win at least one Academy Award and was doing this old film. And on the coverage on Entertainment Tonight, I don't know why this made it into the broadcast, but the actress was having a very hard time with the scene. And they said something like, and this actress now on her 49th take was struggling with the scene. And I'm thinking like, who's right? Like, it was shocking to see such transparency, but at the same time, it was really, really encouraging because then you think, wow, gosh, these amazing people that win these Academy Awards, they have bad takes too. They have bad days too. And I don't know if you've ever seen the screen test with Marlon Brando I believe it was for Rebel Without a Cause.
No, I haven't.
Yeah, you got to see it. It's on YouTube.
Oh.
You can check it out. Marlon Brando's doing a screen test for Rebel Without a Cause. And he's terrible. Like my favorite actor in the world is actually bad because he's emoting and pushing the emotion like all over the place. And I was so shocked, but at the same time, I was so overjoyed. Right. I was so overjoyed because it was like, wow, not even Marlon is perfect. Like Marlon can have a bad day or Marlon can have a bad take, right? And so an editor could be very, very powerful. If I say to the editor, if we directed a film, we say, look, give us the worst cut of this movie that you can possibly give us, right? Just give us the absolute worst. Take all the bad footage, all the bad takes, all the bad stuff and cut that together versus saying, give us the best. Give us the best of the best and cut that together, right? Two possibly very different movies.
Yeah.
Right. And so, but that's the thing that you don't see, kind of like the social media today. People only post the one-sided stuff most of the time. Sometimes people will post the other side of the coin, but generally speaking, most people are just posting the best.
Yeah.
Because they want it to sell and they want the attention and then they want to further themselves. I understand that. But again, it's not reality. And that really messes with perceptions.
Yeah, it messes with the perceptions of the poster because they're living in a false reality because deep down they know that took them 1,000 takes just to get this picture and it's not really the life they're living. But the consequences of that too, the viewers, people looking, oh man, look at them. Now I feel bad about myself. And that's a whole other mental health.
Yeah. So that's where it goes back to your values and really getting in alignment and literally writing it out. Literally writing out your hierarchy of values, the things that you value the most down to the things that you value the least. And some things won't even make the list. But it's very, very important to actually think about that, contemplate that, crystallize those ideas and put them down on paper and create that hierarchy of values for you. And the interesting thing is as you move through life, that hierarchy can change.
Yeah.
That hierarchy can change. And that's normal and that's okay. And sometimes it can change in very small, minuscule amounts over time, or there can be some pivotal paradigm-changing event in your life where it's a singular event that can completely realign your values and change your hierarchy of values. So there's no set way that anybody evolves or grows or changes their hierarchy of values. But as you move through life in every single moment, you have that list. And if you're in tune with that list, it's very, very powerful. But if you're not, and there's things on your list that you're subjugating yourself to, right, or internalizing, and they're not yours, that's a big problem.
It's almost like a compass. Like it's your compass. It's going to lead you where you need to go. But if you don't have that aligned, the compass is going to be taking you any other direction.
But if you have that, you have assuredness. And if you really, really take ownership of that, it makes the journey better because right? And when you think of that, and when you think of your purpose and you think of those things that bring you fulfillment and something happens to you, you automatically become more energized, you become more organized, you're more disciplined, you're more resourceful, you find yourself excited to get up and start the day. You don't get as tired Like, there's the animalistic part of the mind, and then there's the enlightened part of the mind. We have that over other species on the planet, as far as I know. Like, we're the only ones, as far as I know, that have this ability to be in our animalistic mind, and then, which is fight or flight, or be in the enlightened mind. And being in the enlightened mind and having vision, there are the great people of our time are visionaries that see things. For example, Elon Musk, that cat is thinking out 10,000 years. He's thinking 10,000 years into the future, right? He's thinking way, way, way beyond his scope. And if you get into life planning, you literally plan your life at least 1,000 years out. And you say, what are you talking about? How do you plan your life 1,000 years out? Well, look, if you can be successful and change the world and make a difference, and you die and you create a fund or an endowment or a trust or some type of institution, the Sam Denver Institution for Higher Education and Learning, right? And you put, $5 million in the bank and it's earning a certain amount of money, and you only live off of the interest or a little bit less than the interest, so that the $5 million, the initial amount can go up. I mean, you could create generational wealth, and you can help people hundreds, if not thousands of years after you're gone. So these visionaries and these great people, they're not just thinking, most people are just trying to think till the end of the day.
Yeah.
Or maybe what's going on this weekend.
Right.
But there are visionaries out there that are thinking thousands of years into the future.
Definitely Steve Jobs.
Oh, yeah.
Was one of those people, for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thinking thousands of years into the future. They're not even just thinking based on our planet. Like Elon Musk is thinking past the Earth, thinking to the edges of our solar system and beyond, thinking thousands of years out. I mean, that's true vision. Now, of course, right? I mean, man, I don't know the specifics, but I guess he was insanely teased and maybe even beat up as a kid and stuff like that. But to have that wherewithal to, right, get in alignment with your fulfillment and, your purpose, and to continue on, it's the thing that it's your anchor in the storm.
One of my favorite Elon stories I've heard, because I believe I have PayPal. He was in on PayPal.
Yeah.
That's how he earned his first money. But for some, I think it was his cut was 180 million. I could have that completely, but it was something where you don't have to work for the rest of your life. Yeah. And that's generational wealth as well. And he literally took all that, threw it into SpaceX and Tesla. And he talks about how, I got that money and then I needed to borrow money for rent because to have that, that's a very small percent of people that have that mind frame.
Right.
But he obviously knew his value system, like you said, because most people get their hands on that money. Oh my God, we are going to party and we're going to do this. I don't have to do anything the rest of my life. He immediately just said, oh, this is the next step.
Yeah. But how many actors, filmmakers, and artists don't have a plan? They don't have a strategy. They don't have a strategy. If you read Rebel Without a Crew, Robert Rodriguez, he had an idea to break into Hollywood, and he decided that, and so he was subjecting himself to medical experiments for money. And so I don't know if he was in a clinic or what he was. He was a guinea pig on medical trial for cash. And while he was having this done, he was writing his feature. His first one was El Mariachi. And so he had a plan. He said, okay, I'm going to make 3 films. The first 2 films are going to go straight to home video, straight to direct, home video. And I'll cut my teeth on my first 2 films. I'll make all my mistakes. And on my 3rd film, that's going to be the one, and Hollywood's going to come calling, and I'll sell that one to Hollywood, and that's how I'll launch my film career. Of course, Robert Rodriguez, the Mandalorian, been a director on The Mandalorian and Spy Kids, and From Dusk Till Dawn with Quentin Tarantino and all this stuff. And his first film actually became a hit, and he launched on his first film.
Wow!
And he was a crew of 1. He was the director, he was the DP, and he was the sound person. And so what he would do is he would shoot it, and then he would put the camera down, and then he would pick up the boom mic, the microphone, and then he would have them say their dialogue again. And of course, right? How's that going to sync up? 2 different takes. And so he found that as he cut it together, that he could line up at least the first few words or maybe the first sentence, and then it would go out of sync. So then he would cut to the other actor and try and resync up the sound again. So he was literally a one-person crew.
Rebel without a crew.
Without a crew, that's his autobiography. It talked about his process. But see, he had a plan. And see, so many actors today, artists and filmmakers and, around LA today, they don't even have a plan. They don't even have a concrete step-by-step. I mean, we got people thinking 10,000 years into the future, and these actors can't even plan out the rest of their year in terms of what they're going to do. They don't strategize, And like Stephen Covey talks about in the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, begin with the end in mind. Begin with the end in mind. And so these people don't even have an end. And so one day in class, it was a couple of weeks ago, I asked these guys, okay, you guys, because everything was an advanced class, I was subbing, and I said, you guys all have your plan, right? Your agenda, right? They looked at me like I was crazy. And I said, look, you must at least have a love list or a wish list. Like if you could just write out, what would your dream career be? What would you be involved with? What type of people would you work with? Would you be in film? Would you be in television? Would you be in theater? Would you do a mixture of stuff? Would you tour with a one-person show? What? And it's like, people are like, wait a minute, I can do that? It's like they haven't even connected to what their dream career would even look like. So if you can't even do that, then forget about trying to read and, engineer that, right? To kind of deconstruct that and move backwards from that goal and think, okay, what are the steps that I need to take? How can I work backwards from that to where I am today? So that way I know my next steps are going to put me on the trajectory and in alignment with that dream career. And, they say every time you fail to plan, you always hit your target. You always hit your target when you fail to plan. You always hit your target. And so, and if this is something that's so crucial to you, so valuable to you, that you love and desire more than anything else, that you deal with the family members that give you a hard time when you come home for Thanksgiving, and the relatives are saying, well, have we seen you in anything yet? Right? And all the guff you get from your friends and loved ones and all that stuff, and it's like you're just making them right by not taking the time to strategize and create your dream career and actually start to come up with plans and how to manifest that in your life.
Wow, I mean, that goes beyond, it's anything in life too. Like anything you want to do. Now, would you say that's one of the actors? I mean, you've taught so many actors. You've been around so many actors, acted yourself. Do you think that's one of the number one detriments to people not giving up eventually, is they never really had a clear direction to begin with?
Well, everybody's different. And I think a lot of times there's always going to be a percentage of actors, it's not their values and they didn't get it from their parents. They just fell in love with or got drunk, so to speak, on the celebrity and the fame. And they think they want to be actors. It's like again, Dr. DeMartini does this thing where he'll be in a room of 300 people and he'll say, how many people in here want to be wealthy? And practically everybody raises their hand. And then he says, okay, how many of you that are raising your hands are financially independent? And practically every hand in the room goes down. So he says, these people that claim to want wealth, they don't want wealth. They just want what wealth buys. They don't actually want to be wealthy. And there's a saying that goes, money flows from those who value it least to those who value it most. Money flows in life in the direction from those who value it least to those who value it most. And so many of these actors really don't value becoming an actor. They just, like people that are enamored with wealth, they don't really want to be wealthy. They just want to have a lot of money to spend, but they really don't want to build wealth. And it's that same thing. There's always a percentage of actors, right? It's very glamorous, right? It's very seductive. And they don't want to do the work. And they're very easy to spot in an acting class because they're the ones that what?
start missing. They don't
Yeah.
rehearse.
Yeah, they're late for class.
Late
They
for
don't
class.
rehearse, right? It's very, very clear.
They've given you about $10
in late fees.
The late fees.
Yeah, it's very, very clear, right?
Yeah.
They're an actor only in name and posture only, but they're not really an actor. So that's going to weed out a certain number of actors just intuitively from that. And then, of course, then there's other people where, okay, well, somehow or another, they just can't get in alignment, or they just cave into the pressure of, they give it a little bit. And it's always that thing of like, and I think an actor that gives himself a time limit. I'm going to give it 2 years. I'm going to give it 5 years. And if I'm not on a TV show in 5 years, then I'll go to my backup plan. But how can there be a backup plan to that thing that you are intrinsically supposed to do, that is your life's purpose? There can't be a backup plan to something that is your life's purpose and your reason for existing. You follow?
Yeah.
Right? So it's like, there's any number of reasons across the spectrum. Yeah. But it usually kind of falls into things like that.
Yeah.
Because there's actors that I know, incredible actors, they just haven't, I was like telling the class the other day, their work was so good. And I said, okay, well, I want you all to know that I view you as successful actors. In my eyes, you are all successes. You are successful actors. Let's just see if we can get how much of the rest of the world we can get to figure that out. Right? And that's really what it comes down to. You may be a successful actor. It's just that nobody's ever heard of you before. Even Sandy Meisner they said, Sandy, who are your best actors? And he said, you've never heard of them. You've never heard of them. The best people I've ever trained may not have achieved commercial success. And so you've never heard of them. So, like Usain Bolt. Is Usain Bolt the fastest man on the planet? Maybe. Maybe not.
Wise.
Maybe not. Maybe there's somebody else out there that is just naturally more talented, actually has more innate speed. They just not interested in running track. Right? I mean, who knows? Right? I mean, all the power to him. He's an incredible human being, right?
Right.
Props to him, right? Accolades. We bow down to him. He's incredible. But is he really the fastest man on the planet? Who knows?
Well, and you told us, again, I'm butchering the stat. Maybe you can steer me the right direction. But you said something along the lines of the actual talent of an audition or whatever, going for a role, like a very small percentage is actually your talent. Like, I don't know if it's 17%, 20%, whatever.
No, it was
you
something
that?
It was something that I saw or read. I could be messing this up, but I believe it was a panel at South by Southwest. In the film division of South by Southwest, or I don't know if it was a panel of casting directors or whatever. I read this somewhere. And they had kind of decided that collectively among them that, even when you go into the room and you nail it, like you're born to play the part, you've just nailed it, you've wowed them, they love you, that even when you do that, it only accounts for no more than 17% of the decision-making process as to whether or not you get the part. There are all of these other 80+%, all these other factors that are out of your control that have nothing to do with your talent or ability as an actor. That are the reasons why you don't get the part. The project lost funding. The director came off of the project and a new director came on the project, and that director wanted to pick their own cast, so they've scrapped the cast. You were going to play the son of this main actor, and that actor couldn't agree on the money, so they backed out of the project, and now a new actor's come in, and now you look nothing like, relation-wise, you look nothing like the new actor that's supposed to play your father. So there's an offer out. That I've known situations where I've been told that the director said, I want you, but the studio wants somebody else. It's happened many, many times to people that I know that have been in that situation. So there's all of these factors right? It's like the director could love you more than this other person, but the producer says, well, that person's got 1.2 million Instagram followers. That person only has 5,000 Instagram followers. Take the worst actor because it'll be more P&A, more advertising for the project. So there are all of these extenuating circumstances that have nothing to do with your part, with your ability to do the role. And of course, you as the actor feel like you knocked it out of the park. You feel amazing, and then you don't get it. And then what do?
Get down on yourself,
You
question yourself.
Yeah, you question yourself. You demoralize yourself.
Yeah.
Very, very good friend of mine auditioned for a role in Frost Nixon for the role of Jane, the news anchor. Oh gosh, blanking on her name. Actually had a 1 hour meeting with Ron Howard, met with Ron Howard, and had an incredible meeting, and found out that it came down to her and another actress for the part of a news anchor. And, when you get to that level, she was right there. She was right there. Spent an hour in Ron Howard's office talking about things. They hit it off. It was a real great connection. She didn't get it. And she quit acting.
Wow.
She quit. So broken. But remember, we're talking about perception. See, the crazy thing about perception is she'd never been probably so close to working with such a revered director ever in her whole entire career. She was so close. She'd probably never gotten closer to working with someone of his caliber. But instead of looking at it as, I've gotten farther than I've ever been before, so hurt, and I get it, and broken from it, that turned their back on Hollywood and gave up, at least for a period of years. I think they may have kind of gotten back into it, but it's that's when your momentum was going. That's when you're on a roll. That's when your agent is most excited about you. That's when you're kind of in the periphery, in the mind of someone like a Ron Howard that goes, hey, maybe not this, but be in alignment for something else.
Right.
Something happened to me many years ago. I auditioned for Days of Our Lives. And I went in to read. The cast has just since retired, but went in very, very nice. And I went in and I read. And at the end of it, she said, that was really, really good. And I was like, cool, right? And then she said, let's do it again. And I was like, what? That was really, really good. But let's do it again. I thought, wait a minute. She said that she liked it. Why would she have me do it again? And I thought, oh, maybe she wants to give me some direction. She wants to have me do it in a different way. So then I said, okay, sure. Any notes? Any direction? And she said, no, let's just do it again. And then I was like, oh, dang, okay. So we did it, and we got about one page into it, and then she stopped me. She said, okay. And I was like, okay. And she said, I'm just going to tell you right now, you're not going to get the part. It was for a contract role, 3-year contract role. She said, you're not going to get it. And I said, oh. And she said, you're too young for the role. I just needed to be sure. But I really enjoyed your work, but I just want to let you know, you're not going to get it because you're too young. And it was such a relief because you never get feedback like that, that instantly from a casting director. So I walked out of there with my head held high, knowing, wow, she liked me. I didn't get the part, and it wasn't because of my acting. That she was gracious enough to let me know honestly why I wasn't going to get it, because I was too young for the role, but it wasn't because of what I did. So it was a win. Well, 6 months later, I get a call from my agent at the time, and they say, oh, the Days of Our Lives casting, they called. And I said, oh, great, cool. I thought, right, another audition. I said, okay, where can I get the sides? And they said, oh, no, there's no sides. The casting director is just offering you a recurring. Do you want it? I said, what? She said, it's not a contract role, it's a recurring. It has at least a 2 or 3 episode arc. She's just offering it to you. 6 months later, she remembered me, and she didn't even bring me in to read. She just gave me the part.
Wow.
And I ended up doing all my scenes with Jensen Ackles from Supernatural.
Oh my
He was on
gosh.
days, and I got to work with him. And but that's just the crazy story, right? Like 6 months later, she remembered me and didn't even bring me into the room. She remembered me and just offered me a recurring.
And you kept training that whole time.
Yes.
So you didn't quit. Yeah, exactly.
No,
So
didn't quit.
Yeah.
Still in class, still working, still going at
So when
it.
that opportunity came, you were ready.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, but that's just to show you that how powerful our perceptions are, and that we can really demoralize ourselves, really sabotage ourselves. That's why you've got to get in alignment with your values and be very, very clear. And when you'll know that you're working within your values, because when you think of this dream career, when you think of doing what you love and loving what you do, it brings a tear to your eye. You get emotional about it. You get moved. You literally are moved with emotion, because the idea of doing this for the rest of your life brings you such joy, such peace. You're in such alignment with your purpose and your hierarchy of values.
You ever read the book Shoe Dog by
Mm-mm.
Phil Knight?
No.
Out of this world good. Like I won't give it all away, but just going through that story, I had no idea on some, but you talk about the overnight success. These guys were doing this, him and the people he started, years before it really hit and became what it became. And it really gives perspective. The documentary you told us about too, the sushi one.
Oh, Hero Dreams of Sushi.
Yeah, I watched that.
Mm-hmm.
And
Fantastic.
how he wouldn't even let his own son, right? Like get away from the rice for how long? Like years.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you need to learn how to perfect that
Yeah.
perfectly
Yeah.
until you're even ready to come over.
Well, yeah, the greatest sushi chef in the world, like 3-star Michelin sushi chef.
Yeah.
And you would think that there'd be a line out the door of people wanting to train with him. And they can't get, he couldn't get it. Well, yeah, I don't know if it's the way today, but they could hardly get anybody to help because nobody wanted to, sweep the floors for a year before they got allowed to, move up to the next thing. Yeah, and you're like, when you're on rice for like 5 years. You're making rice for 5 years before you move on to that next thing, because it's an apprenticeship.
Yeah. And I bring those up to say, because I think it all comes back. I mean, really what I'm taking from, it all comes down to the values. Like everything goes back to that, everything. Yeah. And if you're in a line and if you know that, well, I want to be the best sushi chef ever one day, I will do whatever it takes. Then you're not going to question that. Like, yeah, I'll sweep the floors for 3 years, you know?
Yeah.
It's the same. I love that example of the callback, and that was cool of her to tell you that feedback.
It was, but that's in my experience, that's very rare.
Yeah, no, that's what I've heard. I've heard usually people hear absolutely nothing. Nothing at all.
Nothing.
And that can be dangerous on its own, like because then your mind just starts going, well, what did I do? Or
yes, correct.
But that's why those values are so important, because you're with that. Like, okay, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, and you have to act for yourself, and you're not going in there to get a job. You're actually there to do a job, and be satisfied with that, and then let it go and forget about it. Yeah. I had no, I may embarrass him, but an old student of mine was having a mental challenge, severely mentally beating himself up for not booking work, and he asked to speak to me one time after class. And I basically kind of had to figuratively kind of emotionally slap him around, because he was just demoralizing himself and beating himself up. And I said, look, you got to snap out of this. This is not. So I straightened him out. And I think within a month, he booked a lead on a Netflix series.
Wow. Was it like Marlon Brando in The Godfather, where the guy comes crying to The Godfather? He's like, be a man.
Yeah. You can act like a man. Yeah. Yeah, what should I do? What can I do? What can I do? Yeah.
By the way, I rewatched that movie recently.
Yeah.
Just to watch, especially, I mean, Brando, obviously.
Yeah.
And Duvall, all those guys. But it was so, I guess, watching Pacino, really, just to watch him go from, was it Mike's the name in the movie? His name's Mike.
Michael Corleone.
Yeah, Michael Corleone. Just watch him go from that innocent, I went to the military, I want nothing to do with the family business.
Sure.
to the end.
Oh yeah.
Where, she's looking and the door
Diane
closes
Keaton's
and he's
looking
the guy.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just like,
Talk about an arc transformation.
man, like really to watch those movies from the 70s. Jeez, they were good.
Yeah.
I know Mr. Carnegie and you had always talked about, go watch the 70s films. Go watch the work that, all those guys were doing. And it really is
just
incredible.
so much, you can go all the way back to the beginning and there's so much. Yeah, but it's quite an extraordinary film because you've got, Diane Keaton that studied with Sandy Meisner. Robert Duvall, right? James Caan.
Yeah.
All studied with Sandy, right? And then you've got, of course, Al Pacino that studied with Strasberg, and right? And, and then Brando, who's credits Stella Adler. So it's just like, man, like the group theater teachers from the group theater and their legacy, even until today, it's incredible what they did in their time.
Is there any particular film that really inspired you? I listened to the podcast you did in Playhouse. You said Star Wars. You went to Star Wars.
Well, that was I was a little kid, right? And that was like my era. It was Indiana Jones, Raiders of the Lost Ark, and Star Wars films and different things like that. Coming out of the 70s, it was a really, 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 for lack of a better word, kind of like a dark time, coming out of the Vietnam era and people realizing that maybe we can't trust the government and can't trust these people. And so cinema got very pessimistic and very down. And then it was kind of like a darker area, reflecting, I think, society at the time in the US and in the world, really. And then Star Wars was like this beam of light that just came out of nowhere and just turned Hollywood around. I have this poster. It was for the special edition of the Star Wars trilogy, and it said 3 reasons why they build movie theaters. It says in the bottom in the poster, 3 reasons why they build movie theaters. And it was like, that was really the beginning of the summer blockbuster. It totally changed Hollywood, Star Wars. And it was, I think people were excited to root for someone again. And it's kind of had that clear delineation between the heroes and the bad guys, and right. And instead of it kind of just being all smeared together and you don't know who to trust and all this kind of stuff, it was a movie that kind of just revitalized and rekindled people's experience with going to the theater and cheering out loud. And I remember just, people hooting and hollering and whistling, and, it was just quite extraordinary as a little kid to experience that. And then, of course, the films from Steven Spielberg and growing up on E.T. and all these other things. And it was just very magical, very, very magical, inspirational time for me. And I think really laid the foundation of just being in awe of, going to the theater and escaping and being transported to these places, that you couldn't even conceive of. It was super, super cool. But, but in terms of acting, there was I forgot who said it, but someone said, before Marlon Brando, people acted, and after Marlon Brando, people behaved. That he changed the face of acting, kind of like Star Wars brought in the summer blockbuster and kind of changed that. Like Marlon brought acting to a level that no one had really experienced it before. And there was a review. I think he was doing a play. It was one of his early plays. I think he was doing something with Toluca Bankhead, the actress. And a reviewer literally wrote in their review that Marlon Brando was so real when he came on at the beginning of the play, I didn't even know the play had started. He was so real that I thought he was just some prop guy doing some stuff to the stage at the last minute. The lights had gone down or whatever it is. Didn't even realize that the play had started, because Marlon Brando's naturalistic, truthful acting it just threw people. It just hadn't experienced anything like that before. And then, of course, everybody started to emulate him, Jimmy Dean and all these other people, James Dean, of course, all these people. I think even James Dean said something like, if I do anything that's Brando-esque, like, stop me, because he revered him as well, as far as I know. And brought, and then, of course, once the floodgates opened, then he had all these amazing, people trying to bring acting to that level of truthful realism that had never been before. I tell my students this sometimes. This is a fun experiment. Get a hold of Streetcar Named Desire and get a hold of the Ten Commandments with Yul Brynner. and Charlton Heston, and watch them back to back. They were made in around the same era, around the same time. And if you watch those two films, or just clips of those two films, like you watch Brando or you watch Kim Stanley, or and then you watch some of the acting from the Ten Commandments, it's quite a dramatic change in terms of the style of acting, the presentational style of acting versus the truthful acting, working from the inside out versus, kind of putting on a performance, so to speak. It's really, really interesting to do.
It reminds me, I don't know if you've heard, I don't know who it was, but for years, no one had ever ran under a 4-minute mile.
Right.
But the second someone
That's right.
ran under 4-minute mile, I think it was like 3 weeks, whatever
right.
it was, everyone starts running under a 4-minute mile because they saw it was possible.
Yes.
That reminds me with Brando a little bit. Once people saw, like, oh, you can do that? Like,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there was this, well, I think in that it was like this mental. Everybody just had this idea, well, it's the human body can't run a 4-minute mile. It's just not possible. And then, once somebody did it, then now it's common. If you're, like if you're a competitor in that,
you have to.
Yeah, you have to. You're not even
be considered.
Right, exactly. Exactly. So, and it's, today it's got to be truthful. It's got to be real. It's, we've kind of left that old style behind, I think, a while ago. Yeah.
So take us into, you do a film lab. You teach film. You teach filmmaking. What was the inception of that? Like because you've been an actor, you teach acting. Sure. What led you to branch out even more into like, I'm going to start teaching film too?
I originally wanted to be a filmmaker.
So that was
my original thing.
Okay.
I wanted to be Steven Spielberg. I mean, I wanted to be a filmmaker. I was blown away. And I had that high school guidance counselor meeting. I remember it was with Mrs. Prince, sweet lady, cared about the students a lot, cared about me a lot. But unfortunately, back then, didn't have a lot of information or resources. And so I had that meeting with my mom and dad. I think it was 9th grade or 10th grade, went into, all the students had to do it, to kind of talk about your path, your trajectory for your career and where you want to go in life. And my parents wanted me, my parents either wanted me to be a doctor or a priest. That's what they wanted for me.
It's interesting.
My mom comes from a whole line of doctors on my mom's side of the family, a bunch of doctors. So they either wanted me to be a doctor or a priest. My parents are very, very religious, very Catholic. And so they wanted me to either be a doctor or a priest. And I wasn't feeling any of that. And so the guidance counselor asked me, what do you want to do? And I said, I want to make films. And she said, okay. And she pulled out like this Rolodex thing. And I don't know how she found this little tiny card. And it said, film director must be a good storyteller. And that's all it said. That's all it said. She had this little informational card. It said, film director must be a good storyteller. And that's all the information she had on it. So when I was in high school, I applied to arguably the biggest film school in the world, the most prestigious film school in the world. I won't name them by name, but I applied and I filled out the application, super, super excited. And then I got to this last section, and it was the last section of the application, and it said portfolio. I said, what's a portfolio? I mean, I know like art portfolio or something like that. And it said, yeah, please submit your portfolio of your work. And, I had to make films on VHS, and I fooled around with that. And I was like, I don't have a portfolio. And I was so dejected. I was so upset because I thought, I'm not a filmmaker. So I threw the application in the trash. And I just gave up. Because I thought, well, if I don't have a portfolio, right, all the other people that are applying that are going to get into this film school, they must have portfolios. I don't have a portfolio. I don't even know what went into a filmmaking portfolio. Because the internet wasn't even around then, right? So there was no digital filmmaking. So, right, well, what was I supposed to have? And so I was so dejected that I gave it up. And then I had then I was wandering around aimless. I didn't know what to do. And then it was like my senior year in high school. I just couldn't wait. I had a bad case of senioritis. I was just kind of floating around. I was uninspired. And a couple of friends of mine that were in kind of like in the drama department. They said, "Oh, you should try out." Because I ran track for a couple of years. I didn't want to do that anymore. I wasn't going to run track in college, and wasn't going to do any sports in college. It wasn't my thing. And so I wasn't doing anything in our last semester. And they said, "You should audition for the school play." I said, "Well, what are they doing?" They said, "They're doing Grease." And I thought, all right, well, my mother went to Juilliard. My mother was an opera singer. She was a world-class talent with her voice. And so I went to my mom and I said, "Mom, they're doing this play." And I kind of rejected her world. Like she had me in choir and glee club and stuff when I was a little kid. And it was kind of like nerdy because my mom sang and I would get embarrassed when she would give concerts and stuff like that. So I kind of just rejected it. But then I thought, all right, well, maybe I'll try this out. And if I don't get a part, then I'll maybe be like a stage manager or help with lights or props or something like that. So I worked with my mom a little bit and I auditioned and I ended up getting Danny Zuko, the lead role.
The lead role.
Lead role. Never auditioned for anything before. And I tried out and I got it. And then my friends that kind of egged me on, the drama actor guys, they were mad at me because they were all, they didn't, right? They encouraged me to do it and they all wanted that part. And then I come in after because they did plays and stuff for all 4 years. This was their last play that they were going to be involved with in high school. They all wanted the part of Kaneki and Danny Zuko. And I come in at the last minute, never have done anything, and I take the role. So they were mad at me. That was tough. They were pissed. So I ended up doing that. And then it was opening night. We had 3 performances, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And when I came out for the curtain call on that first night, and I heard the sound that the audience was making with the applause and all that stuff, I got hooked. I said, "Oh man, I'm going to be an actor." Like I got hooked. It was magical. And I hadn't experienced that magic since falling in love with the idea of making films. And so I went down that path. But what happened for me was I never lost my initial love of filmmaking. And so through the years, I don't want to say I was self-taught, but I call it like I was self-educated. Like I've read as many books as I could on the subject. I went to as many seminars, conferences, did everything I could to learn about filmmaking. And over the years, I started to gain a certain amount of knowledge and stuff like that and getting involved with projects and stuff like that. And then what I actually decided to do is I went to Robert Carnegie, founder of Playhouse West, and said, "I would be interested in teaching a film course here." And he loved it. He loved the idea. He thought it would be terrific. So what I tried to do, and Sandy Meisner said this about acting, he said, the most important question that an actor can ask themselves is why? Why? Why am I doing this activity? Why do I want this? That's the most important question you can ask yourself is why? And so I started to take the theme of that and apply that to filmmaking. Why are we lighting it like this? Why is the camera in this position? Why are we using this type of font in the credits? Why am I editing it in this order? And so I started to apply that, and I came up with a process that I thought, and here's the thing that I always do when I teach. I always think, what were the things that I needed to hear when I was a student that no one ever taught me or that I didn't get? So I've always tried to fill that gap in for myself and thinking, okay, if I was my own student, what would I need to tell myself in order to maximize my potential and my ability to grow and learn? And so I started to put together a technique over a period of years where I started to decipher and figure out, okay, what's the order? What's the proper information that young filmmakers need? And what's the order in which they need to hear it? And so I started to break that down. And I'm still tweaking it and still play around with it and perfect it. And I've taught hundreds and hundreds of students my kind of approach or process towards filmmaking, which isn't really anything so unique or revolutionary. I think it's just kind of like taking the knowledge that's out there and everything that I've learned and kind of applying in a way that's the most digestible to people and where they can start to wrap their heads around it. And what I try and do is demystify as much as possible the filmmaking process, because it can be pretty ominous. I mean, you go to the movies today And, you're sitting there for 20 minutes watching credits.
Yeah.
It's so complex, right? So it's like, how do you look at that and you think, gosh, how am I ever going to get started with this?
Right.
So I try and demystify the process and make it as attainable and repeatable for these young filmmakers as possible so that they can get going in the quickest amount of time, that they can learn, grow. And then the most important thing about filmmaking, there's two most important things, is completion and going again. Completion and repetition, completion and repetition, completion and repetition. I don't care if your film is any good or not, but make a film, finish it. And then as soon as you can, go again. You have to go again because you have a vision for what your project is. And then you try and put that vision into writing, and then you make that, and then you're left with what you've got in the editing room. And so then you have your final film. So there may be this huge gap between your vision and what you actually ended up with. And in that gap, that's where all your learning takes place. And then you take that knowledge, and as soon as you can, you get back on the horse and you make the next one. And so I try and teach kids to make films for free. They don't spend any money, and that they spend a minimal amount of time to get the maximum amount of effort. So that way they're constantly making as many films as they can, as quickly as they can, and as painlessly as they can, because I've known so many people that have broken themselves over the filmmaking experience. And someone was asking me today, they talked about crowdfunding. And I think the statistics bear out that it's like 95+% of everybody that contributes to your crowdfunding are friends and family. And then let's say you raise $15,000 to make a short film, and it goes nowhere and doesn't get into any film festivals and never really sees the light of day. But you learn something from it, but then you go on to make your next project, and you start your next GoFundMe campaign, and you go to those same pool of people and ask them for money again. You're not going to get anything. So they've found that crowdfunding only really works or goes the distance with celebrities. If Ryan Reynolds asks for money to do a little pet, right? People they're going to give. But for people that are not of that status, that it's about, I think, 95+% of the people are friends and family, and they'll only give once.
That's interesting. I'd never heard that before, but that makes complete sense.
Yeah. So, and then what happens after that? We talk about, right, demoralizing yourself as an actor. Now you're demoralizing yourself as a filmmaker because, you ended up with $15,000. You had all this ambition, and, for lack of a better word, you fell on your face. Nothing wrong with that. That's how you grow and that's how you learn. But to recover from that, to come back from that, and to go on again, it's incredibly, incredibly difficult. And so I try and teach students I tell my students, I want you making one short film a week. One short film a week. In a way that is reproducible, that costs them nothing. They don't expend a lot of time or a lot of energy, and then they can just make stuff as much as possible, because that's where the growth and the learning takes place. And then you move up from that. You're making a short film, and then maybe you go on to make a longer short film, or maybe even a longer short film. And then you work towards maybe, and the bottom line in Hollywood is when you go on Netflix or Apple TV or something like that, there's only two categories. There's only two categories of viewing content for the viewer, which is what?
On Netflix?
Yeah. Or Apple TV or Hulu. There's only two categories of content to view.
As far as like genre or TV show or movie?
Exactly. Okay. That's exactly right. TV show or movie. Right? Yeah. That's where Hollywood makes its money. Hollywood doesn't make money off of short films. So your destination as a filmmaker is either to get into episodics or features. Episodics or features. That's how people get on your team, because that's how the industry makes money. They want to make money alongside of you. So, so that's what you have to work towards. Again, having that plan, like Robert Rodriguez, he said, I'm going to make my first 3 films. My first 2 films are going to go straight to video. They're going to be horrible. I'm going to make all my mistakes on those. And the third one, that's going to be the one. And of course, his first one turned out to be the one. And then he went from there, right? But at least he had a plan or an agenda. And then it's the same thing as a filmmaker. You've got to have that vision. Okay, I got to work towards an episodic. I got to work towards a feature. And then all the steps backwards, which I teach in my course, how do you deconstruct that and go all the way back to where you are today, learning about camera and lenses, camera placement, camera movement, pre-production, pre-visualization, lighting, sound, post-production, all editing, all that kind of stuff. And so we give it to the students in a way that they can just get going right away and work towards episodics and features.
It reminds me, I think Tarantino said, he was at some conference or something. He's like, every director or filmmaker has 10 bad films in them.
Yeah.
He's like, go get them out of your system now.
Yeah. I think Robert Rodriguez said that too.
He probably said the same thing.
Yeah.
So
every filmmaker has at least 10 bad films in them. At least 10 bad. So right. So get going. Get those 10 out of you as soon as you can.
Well, and I think too, it's really interesting to hear you talk about the process because you're getting rid of analysis paralysis too. I think a lot of people, I fell victim to it before too, but I can't do it until I have this equipment or until I have, it's like, no, you have to, Pharrell Williams, I'll quote, he's a music producer. Yeah. Mm-hmm. He's like, if you want to be don't go out and buy a $5,000 keyboard and you're not even going to know how to work it. Same probably with the camera. Don't get an Epic Red or whatever on your first. Learn the basic stuff first. Like you said, we have these phones, everything you need to. They have iPhone film festivals, I think now. Like, do those simple things, get those mistakes out. Like I like how you're saying for free first.
Yes.
Before you ask for that money.
You don't have to spend any money to make a film.
Yeah.
You don't. If you have an iPhone in your pocket, you don't have to spend any money. There's no reason why you should spend any money. You don't. And someone goes, well, what about sound? All right, well, make your first films MOS. I make my students do their first films without sound. And they go, why? I go, because I don't want you to depend on dialogue to tell your story. This is a visual medium. Tell your story visually. You shouldn't need any dialogue. Like you can record sound on set, but I don't want any dialogue. I don't want any dialogue. I want them to tell the story without sound. Because if you can't tell a story without dialogue, then you can't tell a story. You got to be able to do it without dialogue. So it's like I tell my students when they're talking about gear, and I've fallen victim to that too. I'm a gadget nerd. I love the latest and greatest, in cameras and cell phones or computers, whatever it is. But just because you have a Ferrari doesn't make you a better driver. And that's what I tell them. And the best camera you have is the one that you already own. The best camera is the one that's already in your pocket. That's the best camera, the one that you already have. And so you can get caught up in buying all the gear and stuff like that. But it's true. You give somebody a Ferrari, it doesn't make them a better driver. So it's exactly the point you're saying. Don't go out and buy a $5,000 keyboard. You don't need it. Not yet.
I love that. And you're really giving people, I feel it's like a nice digestible introduction to get started. Like you said, that's interesting. You are right about the credits. When you go to those, like, holy cow, how many people were involved, especially like a Marvel movie or something.
Right, but most of those people, they're all specializing. Mm-hmm. They're all special, and that's the wonderful thing about filmmaking. It is a collaborative endeavor. It's a different posture. Like when I'm teaching acting, when I'm in an acting class and I'm teaching acting, and you know this, I have to get every student good. It can't be like, well, let's just get some of them good, right? Every individual actor has to grow and has to get good. You have to develop your skill set. But when it comes to filmmaking, because it's so collaborative, so communal, everybody's leaning on each other, right? You may be a whiz at visual effects, and somebody else may be a whiz at light, or somebody else is a whiz at sound or costume design or art direction, catering, what have you, right? Advertising, publicity. I mean, there's so many components that go along into that, so it's a group, it's a team effort. I mean, it takes a village. And that's the wonderful thing, is that you don't have to know everything. I think the more you know about the overall filmmaking process, the better. And it's also nice to kind of be able to speak to other people in their language, if you're talking to people from different departments, and the crew and stuff like that. But the good thing is that everybody can kind of like specialize and work together as a group and use their collective strengths to make the project.
Well, I think it goes, a lot of, like Tarantino or Scorsese, they use a lot of the same actors and everything.
Actors, crew.
But I think for filmmaking, I like, you're naming all I'm sure a lot of those directors use the same people other than actors too in the production and finding their, oh, this guy's
Oh
my
yeah,
DP,
yeah,
this guy's my sound person, this
yeah,
guy, and they continuously make
yeah.
great work together.
Yeah, I worked one time. I was helping out with a play that was being produced at Playhouse West, and got an opportunity to work with Buddy Van Horn, who's Clint Eastwood's stunt double and stunt coordinator.
Wow.
And he had worked with, I think, worked with Clint Eastwood for like 40 years or some insane amount of time, like on every one of Clint Eastwood's projects. And then of course, yeah, you have that where these people, you develop a shorthand, you develop a relationship, you become a family, and you can kind of anticipate each other's needs and have this really nice shorthand between each other and can communicate easily. It's not to say that you can't work with other people, but I don't know, there's something to that. Like Wes Anderson, I'm excited about his new film coming out. He's working with Goldblum again, right? Working with some of these people that he always likes to work with, and it's fun.
It's one of those two, if it's not broke, don't fix it type of things too. And like if you have a system and you have a group of people where it works and you guys have proven success, like why wouldn't you keep doing that?
Sure.
With those people.
But I like Wes Anderson, at least on the actors front. He kind of like, and you'll see in his projects, he'll bring in a new actor.
Yeah.
Someone he'll work with the old crew, and then he'll bring in like, a new wild card that he hasn't worked with yet. And then I always think, is this a one film opportunity with Wes Anderson, or are they going to join the club and will they make it onto the team and be in more than just this one film?
It's kind of like Tarantino. He's kind of like that too. You have like someone like Tim Roth who's been there since Reservoir Dogs.
Sure.
But then he throws in a DiCaprio later on. But then DiCaprio comes back.
Yes. Yeah.
Brad Pitt.
Yeah.
Same thing.
Yeah. Oh yeah, man. That Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Performances in that across the board.
You reminded me
super solid
when you were talking about the actor who took 49 takes or whatever. It reminded me of the DiCaprio scene where he's messing up and he goes back to his trailer and he's kicking stuff.
Oh yeah, right. We all understand that. We all know that. We all know that. Yeah, I think, DiCaprio in that is perfection. Perfection in that role.
Yeah,
it's just extraordinary. Brad Pitt too. I had the privilege of meeting Brad Pitt one time at Red Studios Hollywood. Super sweet guy. Super nice guy.
Great actor.
Yeah,
great actor.
Fantastic. Always excited to see what he brings to stuff.
Well, you talk about doing that thing that's the intuition. I remember watching old Tarantino videos, and he was talking about how he worked at a video store, I think in like Torrance. He grew up in Torrance, I think.
I worked in a video store too.
Really?
Yeah.
So that probably contributed, I'm sure, too.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Just watching movies, taking movies
I would
home.
always put in my favorite films when I was working, and I can't tell you how many times I watched Lost Boys. That was one of my favorite films at the time. Kiefer Sutherland and Corey Haim, Corey Feldman. Oh man, I could recite some of those. Top Gun. I could recite these movies by heart.
Did you go to school out here? High school out here?
I went to high school, in Southern California.
Okay.
Yeah. And part of junior high, but I was born in the East Coast, New York. So my mother was at Juilliard.
Yeah. Okay, that's right.
And father met in New York, and I was I think 11 or 12 when my dad got tired of the weather. It's too cold.
Don't blame him. I'm from the Midwest. Yeah, that's why I came.
Yeah, exactly.
Aside from wanting to be where it's at, it has its perks. Although we had a real California winter this year. For California standards.
Yeah, absolutely. That's for sure. Yeah.
But Chris, I could talk to you for 5 hours. I could. This is amazing. I can't say enough how awesome this conversation has been. I always give the guests the last word, but before we do, I do have another question in film. What do you, because you're a technology guy, we're talking about Elon Musk and AI. What do you think the future of film is? Where do you think it's, I don't know, is there any predictions you have, if you will, on maybe where things are going?
There's so many variables that are changing. Everything is shifted to the subscription model. More and more people are canceling their cable subscription and kind of going a la carte or something, or streaming, either with YouTube TV or Netflix, Hulu, Disney Plus, Apple TV Plus, so it's shifting in that arena. I mean, I think we're still locked in to features and episodics.
Hmm.
You know, some people, I've seen some at film festivals and stuff, and I've seen some things myself where, you know, you watch a movie with a VR headset. Um, I think there's something with that. There's there's going to be something with that, you know, and envision kind of a future where you may not carry the iPhone around with you so much anymore. It may be that you're wearing Apple Glass in conjunction with an Apple Watch, where, you know, and you can already do it on the iPhone, where if you're like walking down Manhattan, you can hold your phone up while you're doing like your walking navigation, and you'll see like arrows and something in AR, right? AR, augmented reality versus virtual reality. Virtual meaning you're completely encased in it. It's all the way around you. But AR, augmented reality, meaning just augmenting the reality of the world that you see. And it's going to be a point where you're sitting there and floating in space, like a text message is just going to appear in front of your eyes, floating in the air in space instead of seeing it on your phone. And the directions. So, you know, you won't be looking at your screen, your Apple CarPlay thing on your screen to see the turn-by-turn directions. It's literally going to be in front of you, and there'll be an arrow in the lane on the highway saying this is the lane. There'll be like a red floating arrow in space outside of the window on the highway. You'll see that. You'll be able to follow that, you know, and then there'll be an arrow pointing to the Baskin and Robbins or wherever it is you want to go. You'll see it. You'll see an arrow, right? I mean, that's coming.
I'd actually like that feature. That's
coming. And they're talking about different things like that. I just read an article about how they think that AR is going to change sports for us. Viewing of sports and things like that. And you know, I mean, the game has changed so much. If you're watching a football game, now they have when they're going for the downs and you know, if you're going for first down and you got your 10 yards and it's underneath the players, right? It's like they're doing something with, you know, the computer technology. And of course now they've got like the drones or the cameras on cables that are floating above the players, and you can get all these different shots, and you know, and they're doing the kind of bullet time where they'll, you know, like in the Matrix, where they can freeze it and spin around. So, you know, they're playing around with all of that stuff. I haven't quite yet seen an effective way. I've seen some VR films. And so when you put on a headset and you're watching a film or something in VR, you're actually in it.
Right.
And the thing, how they get your attention is with sound. So let's say we walk into a room and you're surrounded by a group of actors, and they want you to turn around because the action is going to go behind you. Well, there'll be a sound back here and it'll make you turn, and they'll direct your attention, right? Because when you're staring at a screen with one shot, and then you control everything that the viewer sees. But when you're working in a three-dimensional space like that, it's very, very difficult to kind of like figure out, okay, where are we going to work those actors? You know, where are we going to get the viewer's attention? But it's also very challenging for actors. Like if you watch in Goodfellas, that Warner shot, that famous Warner shot when Ray Liotta and, oh gosh, what's her name? Horrible. No excuse. No excuse for not knowing her name. Walking into the club through like the service entrance, going down into the kitchen. And if you watch that, there's a huge kind of like trick that Scorsese does in that Warner. So as you notice, as they come down the stairs and they walk in like a rectangular square, before they go into the dining room where they bring the table out there, Scorsese actually has them walk around and go around to the same exact spot. And they pull a curtain away from the wall, and you actually go to the same location twice. But while they're walking around, he changes the his set direction for it to trick us into thinking, watch that shot in Goodfellas. But like in that shot, if there's a problem with focus, if there's a problem with pacing, if there's a problem with acting, if there's a problem with props, they have to do that whole entire sequence all over again. So if you're acting in VR and there's 8 of us actors in this shot, and we're working with a 360 degree camera. And of course, anywhere you look within that 360 degrees, the performance is being captured.
Yeah.
And somebody messes something up, you have to reshoot the whole entire thing.
Everything.
You have to shoot the whole thing over again, right? So it's almost like play acting on film, right? Your whole ensemble, when you're seeing a musical at the Pantages or you're seeing a play at the Mark Taper, right? It's like it's live and it's all going on simultaneously and we're seeing it all. And if you do that in VR, in 360 degree kind of vision, you have to get the whole thing right, or you got to do the whole thing over again. So it's interesting. We'll have to see what happens. But I think where people have the most appetite now is TikTok, YouTube, watching videos, watching, like, for example, your podcast. There's a whole other kind of demographic besides film and television that's kind of taken off. And that is just viewing independent content, whether it's on YouTube or a podcast or TikTok or Instagram, little video shorts or whatever it is. That's a whole other thing. But, Hollywood also has to make their money. So it's an interesting time. I'm not sure where it's going to go exactly, but you can see that there are these things that are expanding and kind of moving in different directions. But I don't think we're going to replace the good old-fashioned movie and episodic thing for a while. I think that's kind of built into our psyche in terms of how we're used to digesting content and digesting story.
And I hope we don't. Like, I like to watch.
Yeah.
Part of me doesn't want to be in a VR film.
Yeah.
I want to watch it on a screen in a big theater. I mean, they're talking about how theaters may become obsolete here. So I hope not. Like, I love going to the theater. I don't
think so. I think as long as there are people that draw attention and people want to pay to see them,
they'll still be around.
I'll pay $300 any day of the week to see Pacino live.
Yeah.
Or to see Sally Field live, or to see Benedict Cumberbatch do Hamlet or something like that, which I've seen. It's like, right? I mean, there's always going to be that draw. I don't think that will ever go away. It's like saying like live music's going to go away.
What do you think about movie theaters, like the actual big theaters, like AMC or?
Well, I think they've done a really great job with the AMC A-list, where you pay your $25 a month or whatever it is to see any 3 movies a week. I think that's terrific.
It's a great deal.
And I know a lot of people that take advantage of it. But in terms of what happens, the other problem that I think it's a real distraction, and it just happened. I went to go see Air, the Ben Affleck, Matt Damon movie.
I can't wait to see
Viola Davis steals the show.
Oh,
Viola Davis, incredible. She makes everybody else, just like they're there. She's fantastic. But it's a good film, and you would think. And there was a couple just to my right, literally sitting right next to me, talking the whole entire film. And it's like, still, are you kidding me? And so when that stuff starts to happen, and you can get soon an 8K television at home. Because the whole thing about the movie theater is it's how much of the screen actually takes up your field of view, of your vision, right? If you can you put an iPhone close enough to your face, it's going to be IMAX. If you can see that close, right? If you can see that, right? Because that's all that it is how much of the screen is actually taking up your field of view. And so the problem in the past before with low resolution screens, standard definition screens before HD screens and now 4K screens and then eventually 8K screens is if you got too close to the television, you had the screen door effect where you could see the lines, the gaps in between each individual pixel, and it took away from the effect. But as you can get closer and closer to the television, because the resolution, the pixels are getting so tightly put together that as you move closer to the television, you can move closer and increase the screen size in your field of view, but still have the fidelity, the pixel fidelity of being, right? You can't see any gaps in between the pixels. And you can have, a good surround, Dolby Atmos system at home. Then the movie theater kind of, in a sense, loses its advantage, particularly if you're having to battle with traffic and crowds and unruly people and cell phones going off in the movie theater. That's part of the reason why sometimes I opt not to go, is because I have no idea if I'm going to be able to enjoy the film, in a nice, quiet environment. So it's a toss up, but we lost ArcLight.
Yep.
That was,
That was a big one.
Yeah, that was huge. I loved going to ArcLight. I loved that movie going experience at the Cinerama Dome at Sherman Oaks Galleria.
Yep.
Right. And so that was a bit of a blow.
And Regal, I actually went to that same, it's Regal now.
Yes.
But I guess Regal's in trouble too. But yeah, I hope some of it, I do still like that experience.
Yeah.
But I'm like you too. Like there's been times where I go and I get people want to eat at the movies, but it's like, geez, you have to, I don't want to hear popcorn chopping and drinks getting slurred. I want to be in that experience. I think it's AMC where Nicole Kidman, she's the spokesperson.
Yeah.
I can't, like that beginning, like she sells it really well.
Yes.
Like the experience of the movie, like she's exactly right. That's exactly.
She's absolutely right.
Like, did you see Dune in theaters?
No, I didn't.
Oh boy. That one was, I went and saw that twice. Like that was, I think you'll really, have you seen Dune?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Like from just the visuals of that. And then I think Hans Zimmer did the music for that. Did he do it?
I believe so. Yeah. But
it's just amazing. Just how beautiful a film can be.
Yeah.
Like when you get the right, like a John Williams or a Hans Zimmer.
Sure. The cinematography.
It's
wonderful.
Along with a wonderful story and acting, of course, but it's just a magical experience.
Yeah. Yeah.
To say the least.
Yeah. Well, and then there's that other factor, which is not fun to talk about, but there's been some shootings in theaters.
It's true.
Right. So always in the back of my mind.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it's like, okay. Right. And then they do it in the credits. If you see any suspicious characters, report it to a staff member immediately or whatever it is. It's in the, turn off your cell phones and stuff like that. They literally say, if somebody looks suspicious, report it immediately. Basically saying, we don't want, right? And so it's like, man.
It's an extra anxiety.
It's an extra thing.
Yeah.
It takes, it's an extra thing that hurts movie theaters. I mean, as much as your chances of that occurring are incredibly low, but it's still in the consciousness.
Still in the back of them.
It's still in the consciousness, especially if they're talking about it in the, before with the trailers, before the opening credits.
Yeah.
So.
Well, Chris, this has been spectacular. Before I give you the last word, if people want to get a hold of you, get in contact with you, take any of your classes, where is the most appropriate place for someone?
Well, you can always go to playhousewest.com if I'm around and I'm doing some acting classes. And then I have to make sure I have my handle right. What is it? It is... it's Hollywood Film Lab. One word, Hollywood Film Lab. That's my Instagram, Hollywood Film Lab. And you can find me on that and you can contact me through that. Or if it's stuff at Playhouse West, then you can find me on the website usually.
Okay, great. Yeah. And I do have something for you real quick. I creased the cover by saying on it, it's a brand new copy. It's a book called Awareness.
Oh.
Anthony DeMello. He's one of my favorite authors. I don't know if you've heard of it, if you've read it.
I haven't.
Yeah, this is, I wanted to give that to you because I feel I learned so much from you, not just from acting or from a creative standpoint, but philosophically. I remember my first night when I went and audited right across the street. It was a Tuesday night. I had pages of notes, and I was an auditor.
Oh,
and you were talking about.
I was
your
teaching
class.
it. Okay.
And in that beginning class, I think Michael Lopez said this on his podcast with you. I was just blown away at the talent. And the first thing I saw at Playhouse was a door and activity. People are in tears. And this is a beginner class.
Yeah.
And I'm just thinking like, okay, this is where I need to learn how to do that.
Yeah.
I have no idea how to get there, what they're doing, but this is the place to be.
The funny thing is I had the same experience when I saw
Really?
it. Yeah. I couldn't believe it.
I was in shock.
And I had studied in a lot of places and got a degree in college from theater and doing stuff like that, so I I couldn't believe it, the quality of the work that I saw. And then when I audited and talked to Mr. Carnegie at the end of the class, I told him about my background, that I had some experience, whatever. And he's only said one thing to me. He said, "Are you willing to leave that all behind and start over again?" And I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "I'll see you next class."
Because you had your values in line. You're like,
that was it.
That's what I got to do.
I was so impressed. I was like, absolutely, because I have not been doing it like this. So,
yeah.
yeah.
I always give the guests the last word. It can be anything you want. It can be to aspiring filmmakers, actors, something that's been on your mind, a new movie you saw, absolutely anything. How do you want to leave us?
I would just reinforce that whole thing. Like, if you haven't actually taken pen to paper and written out for yourself the things that you value most in life, your hierarchy of values, from the stuff you value the most to the least, and let it come from within. Don't let it come from an outside source. Don't let it come out of obligation. Don't let it come out of respect or duty. Just get in alignment intrinsically with what you value in life, your purpose for being here, your mission, what brings you fulfillment. It's not about happiness. Because as we said earlier, you don't get into a relationship or have a child for happiness. That's a one-sided fantasy that doesn't exist. You shouldn't go for happiness in life. You should go for fulfillment. Because fulfillment comes with happiness and sadness. But you take both sides. You take it all because it brings you purpose and fulfillment. So I don't think you should be happy in life. I think you should be fulfilled. And so get in alignment with what brings you fulfillment. And then when you love what you do and you do what you love and you have that in you and you think of your dream career, your dream life in the realm of what you value, and it brings a little tear to your eye and you get a little choked up, you know that that's your calling. That's what you're here on this planet to do. And then once you write it down and you put it on your bathroom mirror or on your refrigerator or whatever it is, and you know that that's your purpose, then I think you can weather the storm and you can deal with the naysayers and the haters and the negativity, and you can stay the course. And so I think that everybody should do that. And then, of course, have a plan. Think 5 years out, think 100 years out, think 1,000 years out. That if you could have this dream long after you're gone, what legacy would you like to live? How can you contribute to entertain or enhance or move along the human race with your gifts, your talents, your abilities, and the legacy that you leave behind, even after you've shuffled off this mortal coil?
That's incredible. Chris, thank you, my friend.
Thank you, Sam.
Thank you so much. I'm gonna ask you for part 2.
Okay.
Eventually, if you're down.
Sure.
I feel like we scratched the surface of how much we can talk and cover, but it's great to see you.
It's been an absolute pleasure.
Yeah.
I'm honored to be here and just love helping people along. That's what it's all about, giving back.
Well, you've not only inspired me, but I know you've inspired and been a huge part of a lot of people's lives out here, and we appreciate you.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
All right. Hey everyone, thanks for checking out the Sam Dever podcast. Be sure to follow us on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts. And if you watch the podcast, be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/@the Sam Dever podcast.